Hello friends, I welcome all of you to my lecture session on enzymes. This is the second lecture in this series. In the last lecture we have seen the history, evolution of the concept of enzymes and the contributions from various great scientists is what we have seen. We also have seen a detailed discussion regarding structure of enzymes and what is so unique about enzyme as far as the structure and its function is concerned. So that discussion happened in the last class. So in continuation of that, today we will discuss in detail about mechanism of enzyme action. What does it mean? How actually enzyme is able to achieve biocatalytic capability. Okay, so I made this lecture very simple, so I hope you will enjoy this lecture. Okay, let's go ahead and then see what is there in it. So in the last class we have seen that there are some specific characteristics are observed for biochemical reactions. What are they? They are happening at body temperature or quite nominal room temperature. They can control themselves. They are highly specific as far as their chemistry or functional group is concerned, and they can adapt to the needs of the living being. Okay, that means quantitatively and qualitatively they can change their functionality. So these observations have led to a concept of somebody or something is working in our body to achieve all these objectives. So that was finally found to be an enzyme. Okay, so an enzyme has the capability to achieve a biochemical reaction at room temperature or at body temperature, sorry. An enzyme will have the capability to control itself. An enzyme will be very specific for a biochemical reaction, so it will have its own special appendages on the structure of an enzyme to recognize and achieve a particular biochemical objective, and it will have some mechanism to adapt to the needs of a living being. Okay, so how these four things are coming and what kind of a mechanism is actually behind this entire thing is what we have to see today. So before going into that, let's see in brief about the energy component that is involved in catalytic reactions. Normally, let's say if you have a biochemical reaction like A plus B gives you a product C. Okay, so A is one chemical, B is another chemical, are reacting with each other to give a product C. In biochemistry, usually most of the reactions are reversible reactions. So in case of reversible reactions, what happens? If for a chemical reaction to achieve, the reagents, whatever we are using, the starting materials need to collide with each other. As per Arrhenius theory, effective collisions are needed to give products. Okay, so when collisions are happening, A and B come very near to each other, they will form a bond. So thereby they will be transformed into a product C. Okay, in technical terms, A and B, if these are the two reactants that we have, lowest unoccupied molecular orbital of one of the reagent and highest occupied molecular orbital, LUMO and HOMO, of these two must come together to form a bonding orbital. Let's say if A is a carboxylic acid or C double bond O OH and B is an alcohol R dash hydroxy, then these two must collide in such a manner that this oxygen attacks this carbonyl carbon. Okay, this is what we call it as effective collision. But if you take these two reagents in a solution in a round bottom flask, then in case of a round bottom flask, all these reagents will have degrees of freedom. Three-dimensionally they can move. So this oxygen can hit carbonyl, or oxygen can hit this oxygen, or this can hit this oxygen, or this oxygen can also hit this R group. So all these collisions, whatever are other than carbonyl carbon, all these are what we call them as wasteful collisions. So that is what adds to energy, what we call it as activation energy. Activation energy. Okay, first A and B, these are the two reagents, their internal energy is over here. This is an energy picture, okay, which we have seen in the last class. Okay, and then now we have a transition state. The transition state formation happens via effective collisions, but to achieve that we are bound to go through so many ineffective collisions will be there. So that is what adds to the transition energy, which is wasteful expenditure of energy. Hence, if you use a catalyst, then that will reduce the energy needed for achieving transition state. Okay, so that activation energy can be reduced because it will facilitate it in such a manner that you will have R C double bond O OH and R dash OH. Okay, so it will be held in such a manner that the enzyme, what it does, it will hold on to it and it will bring them together. It is as if you are holding the two molecules with your own hands, and if you can bring them together, what is it that you are doing? You are physically assisting the molecules to collide in an appropriate manner so that every single hit can give you a product. Every hit is an effective collision. Every collision is an effective collision. So in this way, catalyst can reduce the wastage of energy. So thereby it will reduce the energy that is needed for formation of the reaction complex. This one, transition state, is achieved very easily without spending much energy. So thereby it results in formation of more product with very less expenditure of energy. That too because you are saving so much of energy, so much of time will be saved. The rate of reaction will also be enhanced. Okay, so this is the way how catalysts work. And here, as far as enzyme is concerned, enzyme need to have some environment, some arrangements on its structure to hold on to the molecule and to bring them together or bring them apart so that you can make or break a bond. So this is what is one of the concepts that we need to have a very clear idea. So I made a small animation here for your clear understanding. Let's say if this is the enzyme and this is the molecule which is supposed to be hydrolyzed over here, then an enzyme will physically hold on to the molecule so that if it is a hydrolytic reaction, we need a water molecule to attack over here because it is as if holding on to the water molecule. So this is where we have the reactive environment. So this is exposed to the outside. So whenever a water molecule hits over here, that is going to be an effective hit. Okay, it is as simple as that. Now the molecules are hydrolyzed and now they will be released into the solution. So this is the way how enzyme physically assists a molecule to achieve a particular biochemical reaction. Next one is, this is another very important concept which we need to get a very clear idea. Let's say in case of an organic reaction where we have to achieve, this is the product and this is our starting molecule. Okay, let's say the energy gap that we have over here is around 250 kilocalorie. Okay, if it is 250 kilocalorie per mole is the energy that is needed to achieve this product. In traditional organic chemistry in your laboratory, you can supply this energy in the form of heat, stirring, etc. Okay, heat, either ordinary heat or a microwave heat or whatever it is, the energy is supplied so that in a single step we can achieve this molecule. But 250 kilocalorie is a huge energy that can be supplied over here. But in case of a biological system, it is not possible. Let's say, can you supply 250 kilocalorie? Can you boil your body to achieve hydrolysis of a glycoside? No, it is not possible. So that's the reason why in our biological environment we will have a series of steps to achieve the same objective. Here there will not be any change in the energy requirements, because bond internal energy you cannot change and I cannot change. So to achieve this much energy is needed. That will be split 50 50 50 50 and 50. For your understanding, I am splitting it like this, but usually it will be adjusted in the similar manner, so that the product will be converted to an intermediate, then that will be converted to another intermediate, then, so that in this way slowly the molecule will transform into the product. Okay, like here the example I am giving over here is glycolysis, where glucose 6-phosphate is going to be converted to glyceraldehyde phosphate. Okay, so many steps will be there, where one by one the chemical reactions are achieved in such a manner that the products are obtained by spending minimal energy. So to give you a similar kind of a situation, so this is it. So here, so what are we doing? We wanted to lift a stone. So one of the way is to lift it all by yourself, or else you take the help. So here so much of assistance is coming. So in which case it is relatively easy. So the term easy we use wherever energy, so much of energy and attrition is not there. So in that case only we use the term easy. So here, because it is assisted and it is using some mechanisms to achieve this objective, so less energy will be wasted, less attrition will be there. But here it is by using brute force. Okay, so somebody is trying to lift the stone all by himself, so it leads to attrition, it leads to wastage of energy in the form of heat, and whenever there is heat, damage will be there. Because let's say I'll give you one more simple example. So here how much energy is needed? Here 250 kilocalorie of energy is needed. Here only 50 kilocalorie. Okay. So how much energy that is needed for breaking a covalent bond? 70 kilojoules. Okay, let's say here change the terminology to joules for easy understanding. Okay, so here let's say in this case 250 kilojoules of energy is there. So here it is split into 50 50 50 50 and 50. Let's say you are supplying 250 kilojoules to achieve a reaction. Okay, energy cannot be localized. So when you are supplying energy, your environment is exposed to the energy changes. Hence, it may lead to alterations in the nearby environment. Let's say you are cooking food. Okay, so if it is really hot in that local environment. So in the local environment, let's say if you put your finger on the reaction vessel, that itself is enough to damage your skin. Yes or no? Okay, so in that way, let's say when a biochemical reaction is happening inside a cell, you will have nucleus will be there, mitochondria will be there, and then so many apparatus will be there, Golgi apparatus, etc. Ribozymes will be there. All these are in the same compartment. So when chemical reaction is happening over here, okay, some kind of energy exchange is happening over here, that is going to influence all the nearby environment. So the energy that is needed for destroying a covalent bond is close to 70 kilojoules of energy, kilojoules per mole of energy. Hence, if you supply 250 kilojoules of energy to a localized region, that is going to have influence on the nearby environment and create damage and can damage the nearby environment. So that is the reason why this type of chemical reactions are not possible, or they will not happen inside your cell. Whereas here this type of reactions only are going to happen. So here so many workers are there, they are helping with each other. In our biochemical environment, all these workers are nothing but enzymes. Okay, so these are enzymes which are working in coordination with each other, so that whatever work he has done will be enhanced or taken forward by the second one, and will be taken forward by the third one to achieve the objective. So this is the way how enzymes help each other to perform biochemical reactions. So this type of environment you will see so many examples are there, like urea cycle is there, Krebs cycle is there, glycolysis cycle is there. In all these cycles, a chemical is transformed into another chemical with the help of a set of enzymes. Okay, so friends, this is the way how enzymes achieve biocatalysis. The third concept which we need to get clarity is on the active site of an enzyme. The enzyme is a huge molecule. It's, as I told you, it's a globular protein. Okay, so in the last class we have seen the structure of an enzyme, where you will have structurally rigid regions will be there and flexible regions will also be there, because an enzyme need to be semi-flexible. So here the active site is a three-dimensional cleft formed by groups that come from different parts of the amino acid sequence. So the protein contains in certain regions, okay, cleft formed between the protein folds, and the entire A region contains amino acids with the specific functional groups to assist in the biochemical reaction. So within the active site you will have three regions can be there. One of the region is a part of the active pocket, can be we call them as binding pockets, where it assists, it contains the functional groups to complement the functional groups that are present on the substrate, both shape wise as well as chemistry wise. The complementarity will be there to assist in the binding of the substrate. And the second part is the catalytic part. So this is the catalytic part. Catalytic part contains certain amino acids, set of amino acids will be there, which will participate in the biochemical reaction. Okay, serine, histidine, etc. These kind of amino acids will be there, which will assist in the biochemical reaction to happen. And the third part is auxiliary groups that reinforce and finish the proper shape of the active site. Sometimes the active site contains certain regions, sometimes within the active pocket or outside the active pocket, which when occupied by certain substrates or activating groups, the active pocket shall have optimal three-dimensional shape and size. So these are usually called them as, these auxiliary groups are usually called, we call them as enzyme activators. Okay, so in this way active pocket can be defined. So I have one picture for you. So this is the entire enzyme, a glucokinase enzyme, where this is the active pocket. So inside you have a cofactor as well as a cofactor like magnesium is there, and a coenzyme like ATP is also there. And here if you see in the within the active pocket, the molecule is recognized or held in appropriate shape and size position, appropriate position, by a set of amino acids like this, and they are interacting with the substrate via several non-covalent bonds. Usually now non-covalent interactions usually happen between substrate and the enzyme. And these amino acids, if you closely observe, they are completely different, and they have different types of functional groups which complement, okay, the kind of environment that we have on glucose molecule, so that it helps in holding the molecule in appropriate shape and size. So here we have the magnesium ion. Okay friends, I hope the concept of active site is clear to you. Next one is the as far as the characteristics of enzymes are concerned. So they can be explained by having two types of mechanisms. One of them is lock and key theory or lock and key mechanism. The second one is induced fit mechanism. So these are the two mechanisms which helped us understand the way how the enzymes are working. In case of lock and key theory, the theory is relatively very simple. As you all knew, enzymes or any other organic compound, they contain three-dimensional shape and size. So when two such molecules are interacting with each other, okay, so it is not only the chemical complementarity, but physical complementarity is also needed. Shape complementarity is also needed. Hence, what Emil Fischer in 1897 he proposed this theory. He put forward this theory of enzymes and substrates, they interact with each other only when the substrate has specific three-dimensional shape and size, so that while interacting with the enzyme, if the shape complementarity matches, then only it can fit into the receptor pocket. So the fitting into the receptor pocket is the prime requisite for a biochemical reaction to happen. So this could be one reason why glucokinase can recognize only glucose but cannot recognize a ribose. Okay, so this is it. And further, we have another example where hexokinase enzyme is there. Hexokinase, okay, hexokinase. So we have hexokinase enzyme is there, and glucokinase enzyme is there. Glucose is so specific for glucose only, and it will not be able to phosphorylate a ribose. Okay, it can do only phosphorylation to glucose, and it will have very, very weak interaction to other hexoses like fructose. Very low affinity will be there. Whereas hexokinase can phosphorylate any hexose. Any hexose can be phosphorylated to hexose monophosphate. Hexose monophosphate. Okay. The reason could be it has one of the receptor pocket. The structural requirement is not very much rigid. Okay. Structural requirement is not very rigid, so that it can accept any type of hexose into its receptor pocket, whereas glucokinase has structural restrictions which will allow only glucose to fit into the receptor pocket, whereas other substrates will not be able to bind onto the receptor pocket effectively. So this effective binding is essential for enzyme substrate complex to stay. Okay, so only when enzyme substrate complex is stabilized, then only further biochemical reactions can initiate and happen. If the substrate complex did not form, or if it dissociates quickly, because enzyme substrate complex, enzyme and substrate forms enzyme substrate complex, and that gives you the product. Okay, so this is a reversible reaction. Hence, if enzyme substrate complex did not get stabilized, the product cannot form. So this is one reason why the lock and key theory is readily accepted, and it is still one of the guiding principles behind understanding enzyme substrate interactions. So friends, I hope you understood the concept of lock and key theory. It's very simple. Okay, just like a lock and key, if a matching key is used, then only a lock can be opened, otherwise it cannot be opened. Every key cannot fit into the receptor, every key cannot fit into the lock and open it. So the next concept is this one, enzyme specificity, the induced fit theory. So here, in case of enzyme specificity, because enzymes are so specific to a substrate, one of the reason is lock and key theory. They need to have specific shape complementarity to the receptor pocket. So in case of the second one, what Koshland observed is the precisely defined arrangement of atoms in an active site that is finished after the substrate is bound is the cause of high substrate specificity of enzymes. This process of dynamic recognition of the proper substrates is called induced fit. As you all knew, enzymes are not dead molecules. Okay, they are not completely rigid. They are highly dynamic, and partial flexibility will be there. Hence, while interacting with the external environment, while interacting with the substrate, it is not exactly like lock and key. Even within lock and key, when you are turning the key, some kind of semi-flexible environment will be there inside the lock, but outside the shell is rigid, structurally stable, but inside you have a mechanism that is semi-flexible. So here that semi-flexible environment allows the ligand to make optimal contacts. Okay, the enzyme adjusts so that it forms optimal interactions. So here that concept is what we call it as induced fit. I gave you a small example here. Let's say this is the enzyme and this is the receptor pocket. So you can see clearly here the shape complementarity is not 100%. Okay, here it is matching, but whereas here it is not exactly matching. A little bit of deviation is there over here. But if you see, the substrate interacts with the enzyme, that will initiate a series of changes, conformational changes within the enzyme, so that it changes its three-dimensional shape to have optimal interactions with the substrate. So in this way, enzyme substrate interactions will initiate a series of conformational changes within the enzyme to achieve the actual three-dimensional shape that is needed for the active site to perform the biocatalysis. Okay, so this theory is what we call it as induced fit theory. So here a small extension is there to this theory, where let's say here a simple substrate is achieving this entire induced fit concept. Let's say you have an enzyme. On one side you have the receptor pocket, and on the other side you have another receptor pocket, where this is your substrate. This substrate and this shape, if you observe, both does not have any complementarity. Okay, so this cannot fit into this receptor pocket now. This won't be able to fit into the receptor pocket now. What will happen? An activator will be there, which will interact with the receptor pocket nearby. Okay, so what will happen then? So this is the receptor or the enzyme. We have activator over here. This activator, okay, is interacting with so many amino acids over here. So that will create some change which will force the enzyme to transform into this active form. This is active form. Hence now if you give the substrate, it fits into the receptor pocket properly, so that a product is going to be formed. So this kind of change, activation of energy also falls into this induced fit theory, but this is what we call it as allosteric activation. Allosteric activation or allosteric modulation. This is only extension of induced fit theory only. So friends, this is the way how an enzyme achieves specificity to a substrate because of its need for shape complementarity, chemical complementarity, functional group complementarity, and charge complementarity. Here in two ways the concept can be explained. One is lock and key theory as proposed by Emil Fischer, where shape complementarity is compulsory for an enzyme to have optimal interactions with the substrate, because enzyme substrate complex forms via non-covalent interactions, non-permanent interactions. That's the reason why enzyme and substrate will need to stay for some time to achieve further chemical reactions. If the dissociation is happening so rapidly because of very weak interactions, the biochemical reactions cannot be achieved. Hence, for optimal interactions, optimal reaction rate, optimal interactions need to be there between receptor and substrate. For that, optimal three-dimensional shape is needed. That's what we call it as complementarity. That's how lock and key theory helps us understand the functioning of an enzyme. An extension of that idea is induced fit theory as proposed by Daniel Koshland. So here what is actually happening is, because there is almost like more than 60 years gap is there between lock and key theory and induced fit theory. as we are growing, as we are doing research work, our understanding on nature increases, okay, so that we can improvise our thinking. So he added flexibility to enzyme, saying that enzymes will adjust their conformation in such a manner that it will interact with the appropriate substrate with more affection. It will hug the substrate more affectionately, so that optimal interactions can be there that facilitates in achieving the biochemical objective. Okay, so this can happen by a single substrate, or an enzyme needs an activator like a cofactor or a coenzyme or some other chemical, so that induced transformational changes can be induced from some other chemical. So in that case we call it as allosteric modulation. Okay, so friends, I hope you understood the concepts of enzyme and its catalytic activity, induced fit theory and lock and key theory. So friends, if you have any doubt in this in these concepts, please let me know through the comment section. I'll try to clarify your doubts. Please share this video with your friends so that they also can get benefited. And I'll meet you again with another very interesting lecture soon. Thank you for your time. See you.